Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Greg was 41, and his life, up until that March Sunday, had seemed to follow the perfect script of stability and predictability. For nearly 2 decades, he'd worked as an accountant, building a solid career offering consulting services to small and medium businesses, dealing with numbers, tax analysis, and financial planning. He was a methodical, organized man who found comfort in the logic of balance sheets and the clarity of spreadsheets. Outside of work, his life was just as structured, married for 12 years to Rachel, a 37-year-old elementary school teacher, and father to 2 kids, Jake, 9, and Mia, 6, he believed he'd built something unshakable. Their family routine was smooth: dinners at the table, weekend trips to local parks, conversations about the kids' progress at school, modest but happy vacation plans. Rachel had always been a constant, loving, devoted presence. She never gave any signs something was off. She didn't hide her phone, never came home late without letting him know, never made vague excuses or gave him distant looks. Greg trusted her completely, unquestioningly, like you trust gravity or the sunrise. That Sunday morning, the sky was clear, the kind of day that promised peace. The family was getting ready to head to Rachel's parents' house for their monthly barbecue, a noisy, warm gathering of aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. Greg was tidying up the living room while Rachel finished getting ready upstairs. Jake and Mia were playing in the hallway, laughing loudly, their innocence filling the house with light energy. Rachel came down in a hurry, wearing a blue floral dress, her hair in a messy bun, and grabbed the big brown leather bag she'd left on the coffee table. She tugged the strap quickly, but the fabric, worn thin from use, gave way. The bag dropped to the floor with a thud, spilling its contents across the wooden floor: wallet, sunglasses, a floral-covered notebook, pens, a red lipstick, tissues, car keys. And right in the middle of it all, a small, white box, unmistakable. Greg, who'd been folding a blanket on the couch, turned at the sound. His eyes caught the scene: Rachel crouched down, frantically trying to gather everything, her hands shaking, her face suddenly pale. But he'd already seen it. The white box. Next Day Pills. The name printed clearly on it, impossible to miss. The blister pack was already open, empty. Greg felt his stomach turn. He walked slowly over to where Rachel was crouched, knelt beside her, and picked up the box before she could hide it. She froze, eyes wide, breathing fast. Greg examined the packaging. The expiration date was far off, but the empty blister pack meant recent use. He knew, with the cold precision of someone who dealt with data all day, that this made no sense. Rachel had had an IUD for years. He'd gone with her to the appointment for insertion 5 years ago, after Mia was born. There was no legitimate reason for this to be there. None. Greg looked up at Rachel, still crouched, paralyzed. "What is this?" His voice was calm, but a tension vibrated under every syllable. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I found it. At school. One of the students must have dropped it. I kept it to return it." The lie was weak, desperate, and she knew it. Greg knew every nuance of Rachel's voice, every micro-expression, every hesitation. He knew when she was lying. And she was lying now. "Rachel." He said her name with a firmness that cut through the air. "Don't make this up. At least respect me now." Jake appeared in the doorway, holding a toy car. "Dad, are we going yet?" Greg forced a smile, the mask of normalcy every father learns to wear. "In a minute, champ. Go play upstairs with Mia, okay?" Jake ran off, oblivious. Greg shut and locked the living room door. Rachel stood slowly, legs unsteady. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed over her chest, eyes avoiding his. "Greg, the truth. Now." He held the box so tightly his fingers turned white. Rachel started crying, silent tears rolling down her face. She squeezed her eyes shut, like closing them could erase reality. Then, in a low whisper, almost inaudible, she confessed. There's someone." The words landed like weights. Greg felt the floor shift beneath him. "There's someone," she repeated, voice breaking. "It's been 8 months. 8 months." Greg processed the information with the analytical mind that defined him, but nothing made sense. 8 months. Almost a year. A third of the last year of their lives. While he worked, planned for the future, took care of the kids, trusted her, Rachel had been with someone else. Who? The question came out icy. Rachel wiped her face with the back of her hand. Ethan. The soccer coach at school. Greg knew the name. Rachel had mentioned Ethan a few times, always in passing. Ethan organized a tournament. Ethan brought new equipment. Just that. Nothing that raised flags. How did it start? Greg didn't know why he was asking these questions. Part of him wanted to know everything, understand every detail, as if mapping the betrayal could make it less devastating. Another part wanted to walk out, never look at Rachel again, erase the last 8 months from his memory. But he stayed. Rachel took a shaky breath. "We started talking after work. He was funny, made me laugh. You were always busy, Greg. Always working, always tired. I felt alone." The excuse lit something inside Greg. A cold, controlled, deep anger. Alone? He took a step forward. "I was here. Every day. Eating with you. Taking the kids to school. Paying the bills. Planning vacations. You weren't alone, Rachel. You chose to betray me." Rachel sobbed, but didn't argue. There was no argument. Greg kept going, his voice now sharp, cutting. "And this pill? When did you take it?" Rachel squeezed her eyes shut. "Last week. We didn't use protection. I panicked." "Where?" "A hotel. Near the school." Greg felt sick. He imagined Rachel, his wife, mother of his children, in some cheap hotel room with another man. Imagined the lies she'd told to get there. How many times? "Greg, please, how many times, Rachel?" I don't know. A lot." The brutal honesty of the answer hit him like a punch. Greg turned, walked to the window, stared out without seeing anything. The street was quiet, sunny, completely indifferent to the collapse happening inside that house. "Does he know you're married? That you have kids?" Rachel nodded, voice barely audible. "He knows. And he doesn't care. It wasn't a question. He's single. He said he doesn't see a problem." The coldness of that reply destroyed something in Greg. He spun around sharply. "Pack your things. You're leaving. Now." Rachel's eyes widened. "Greg, no. Please. We can talk, we can, there's nothing to talk about. You ended it. You destroyed everything." He opened the living room door, voice firm, unshakable. "You can go wherever you want. To his apartment, to a friend's place, I don't care. But you're not sleeping here tonight. Not under the same roof as me and the kids." Rachel tried to move closer, but Greg raised his hand, stopping her. "Don't touch me." She went upstairs crying, locked herself in the bedroom. Greg heard drawers opening, clothes being thrown into a suitcase. 20 minutes later, Rachel came down with a travel bag, eyes swollen, face shattered. Jake and Mia appeared in the hallway, confused. "Mom, aren't we going to the barbecue?" Mia asked, her voice thin. Rachel crouched, hugged them both, tried to smile. Mommy needs to take care of some things, sweetie. You'll stay with Dad today, okay? Jake frowned. But you're coming back, right? Rachel looked at Greg, who looked away. We'll talk later, Jake. She walked out the door, got in the car, and drove off. Greg shut the door, pressed his forehead against the wood, and breathed deeply. The kids watched him, scared. He knelt down, forced a smile. It's fine. Mom just needed to step out for a bit. How about we order pizza and watch a movie? They agreed, still uncertain, but accepted the distraction. That night, after Jake and Mia were asleep, Greg sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. He couldn't stop thinking. 8 months. How many lies had Rachel told? How many times had she said she was at a teacher meeting or training when she was really in a hotel with Ethan? Greg opened the bank app, accessed their joint account. He began reviewing the statements from the past few months, eyes scanning every transaction. And then he saw it. Hotel payments. Always on the same days of the week. Always modest amounts, discreet, but repeated. He opened a spreadsheet, something he automatically did whenever he needed to organize complex information, and started cross-referencing dates. Every hotel payment matched a day Rachel had claimed to be at a meeting or course. He took photos of everything with his phone. On Sunday morning, he called a lawyer colleague he trusted. They set up a meeting for Monday, first thing. Greg didn't sleep well that night. His mind spun, processing the betrayal, the lies, the total collapse of trust. On Monday, he dropped the kids at school. Jake was quiet, Mia asked about her mom 3 times, and went straight to the lawyer's office. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Greg presented everything, the pill box, the bank statements, the cross-referenced dates. The lawyer, a 50-year-old bald man named Robert, listened with a serious expression. You've got a strong case, Greg. Proven infidelity, use of marital funds to support the affair, and the most important factor, you can argue Rachel put the children's emotional stability at risk. How so? If we can prove she exposed the kids, directly or indirectly, to the lover, or that she maintained the affair in a way that disrupted the family routine, that weighs heavily in custody decisions. Greg thought. Then he remembered. Jake. 2 weeks ago, during dinner, Jake had casually mentioned something about Mom's new friend who sometimes picks her up. Greg hadn't paid attention then, thought it was just a coworker. But now it made sense. Ethan. My son mentioned seeing the lover picking her up. Robert wrote it down. That's relevant. We'll use it. In the days that followed, Greg filed for divorce. He requested primary custody of Jake and Mia, citing inappropriate conduct and an unstable environment created by Rachel. She contested it, hired a lawyer, claimed Greg was exaggerating, that one mistake doesn't define who she is. But the evidence was solid. The bank statements. The photos of the pill box. Jake's testimony, carefully recorded by a forensic child psychologist. The story began to leak. One of Rachel's former co-workers, a friend of Greg's from years ago, found out through another teacher. The news spread like wildfire. Parents talked in WhatsApp groups. Rachel's name got dragged through the mud. Ethan, pressured by the school administration, fearing scandal and possible lawsuits over inappropriate conduct in the workplace, was fired. He ended things with Rachel over the phone, cold and distant, saying he couldn't get involved in that mess anymore. Rachel called Greg, desperate, begging for a second chance. I messed up, Greg. I know I did. But we can rebuild. For the boys. Greg listened in silence. Then he replied, calm but final. You killed it, Rachel. There's no going back. You chose him. Now live with the consequences. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Greg was granted primary custody of Jake and Mia. Rachel got alternating weekend visitation and was ordered to pay child support, since the judge determined she had stable income as a teacher and her conduct directly contributed to the family's breakdown. Asset division was split evenly, but Greg kept the house, purchased before the marriage, something his lawyer used to his advantage. Rachel moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. The social isolation was brutal. Friends drifted away, some out of judgment, others out of discomfort. She was transferred to another school, far away, where no one knew her story. But the guilt followed her. The kids, especially Jake, began treating her coldly. He asked hard questions during visits. "Why did you do this to Dad? Didn't you love us anymore?" Rachel had no answers that satisfied. Mia, younger, still sought her mother's affection, but there was a new distance, a hesitation in the hugs. Greg, meanwhile, focused entirely on the kids. He cut back on work, started picking them up from school every day, helped with homework, organized weekends full of activities. He started therapy, encouraged by Robert, and learned that talking about the pain, processing the betrayal, was essential to moving forward. The initial rage, the cold fury that had consumed him in the first few months, gave way to a sad, but liberating, acceptance. He didn't hate Rachel anymore. He just didn't feel anything at all. A year after the separation, Greg was at Mia's school performance. The girl played a tree in a play about the seasons, and he filmed everything with his phone, smiling proudly. Rachel was there too, sitting a few rows behind, alone. Her eyes were fixed on Mia, but there was deep sadness in them, awareness of what had been lost. After the show, as parents gathered in the courtyard for photos, Greg ran into Rachel. She tried to smile. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Greg nodded. She was. Greg, I wanted to thank you for not poisoning the kids against me. I know you could have. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. He saw the regret, the exhaustion, the loneliness. But he didn't feel pity. Or anger. Just indifference. I wouldn't do that to them. They deserve to have a mother, even if you failed as a wife. Rachel nodded, eyes wet. I'm sorry. Every day. Greg shrugged. So am I. But we move on. He turned, called Jake and Mia, and the three of them walked away. Rachel stayed behind, alone, watching them go. Greg slowly rebuilt his life. He started hanging out with friends again, picked up old hobbies, he returned to running on weekends, joined a book club. He met new people, including a woman named Claire, also divorced, mother to a teenage son. They began meeting for coffee, conversations that flowed naturally, without pressure. Greg wasn't in a hurry. He'd learned that trust is built slowly, brick by brick, and there are no shortcuts. The kids adapted to the new routine. Jake, who'd initially been angry, began opening up more to his dad, talking about his fears and confusion. Mia, with the resilience of childhood, learned to balance her love for her mother with the security she found in her father's home. Rachel kept trying to win back the kids' trust, showing up to every visit, being punctual, participating in school events when allowed. But the relationship never returned to what it was. There was a permanent crack, a constant reminder that choices have consequences. 2 years after the separation, Greg was at Jake's 11th birthday party. The house was packed with friends, cousins, classmates. Claire was there, helping organize games. Rachel hadn't been invited, it was Greg's weekend, and he'd preferred to keep things simple. Jake blew out the candles on the cake, surrounded by laughter and applause, and Greg felt a peace he hadn't known in years. He looked around. The life he'd built after the storm was different from the one he'd imagined, but it was good. It was real. That night, after everyone left and the kids were asleep, Greg sat on the porch, a beer in hand, looking at the stars. He thought of Rachel, briefly, and realized he didn't feel pain anymore. No anger. No longing. Just a lesson learned: trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt. But life, with time and effort, can be reconstructed. And sometimes, a fresh start is better than what came before. Greg took a sip of his beer, smiled to himself, and went inside. The past was where it belonged. Behind him. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.